My husband and I are expecting a baby and we are both overjoyed. This is such a special, exciting time for us. Up until now, we've chosen to keep the news private. We didn't tell anyone because we wanted to wait until the right moment to share it. We also wanted to be sure everything was going well before making a big announcement. Now that I've reached the 3-month mark in my pregnancy, we felt it was the perfect time to let our loved ones know. So we decided to plan a small, cozy gathering just for our closest family members. We wanted the setting to feel warm and personal, something simple but meaningful. During the gathering, everything seemed to be going smoothly. Everyone was chatting, laughing, and enjoying the time together. My husband and I were moving around the room, talking with our family members and soaking in the happy atmosphere. It felt like the perfect moment, warm, relaxed, and filled with love. Then, out of nowhere, my father-in-law walked in with my mother-in-law right behind him. My husband and I were both caught completely off guard. We hadn't expected to see them together at all. You see, they were in the middle of a very painful and complicated divorce. Just recently, my father-in-law had discovered that my mother-in-law had been unfaithful to him. To make matters worse, she had been having an affair with the man who cleaned their pool. Understandably, my father-in-law ended up kicking my mother-in-law out of the house. She had then come to us looking for help and a place to stay. However, the timing couldn't have been worse. We were in the middle of renovating our one and only guest room, turning it into a nursery in preparation for the baby. But at that point, we hadn't shared our pregnancy news with anyone, not even close family. So we couldn't explain the real reason why she couldn't stay with us. Adding to the challenge was the fact that my husband has a complicated relationship with his mom. They aren't especially close, and there has always been some emotional distance between them. Still, he didn't want to leave her completely on her own. Instead of offering her a place in our home, he offered to pay for her to stay in a hotel for a week, just to give her some time and space to figure things out. Unfortunately, she didn't take the offer well. She reacted by yelling at him in frustration and hurt. And, like she had done many times before, she turned her anger towards me. She blamed me for why my husband didn't want her staying with us, suggesting that I was the reason he was pushing her away. Sadly, this kind of situation isn't new for us. This is how things usually go. Whenever my husband sets a boundary with his mom or says no to her, she somehow always finds a way to blame me for it. In her eyes, I'm the reason he doesn't do what she wants. It's like she has a personal vendetta against me, and it's been that way for a long time. Looking back, there have been many moments where she made it clear she didn't want me in his life. She's tried to come between us more than once, even before we were married. One of the most unforgettable moments was during our wedding. She actually tried to ruin it by hiding our wedding rings. Thankfully, she didn't succeed, and the ceremony went on as planned, but that memory has always stayed with us. It was just one of many signs that she struggled to accept that her son had chosen someone else to build a life with. And maybe that's what makes it harder for her to accept. No matter what she does or how much she tries to cause a rift between us, her son continues to choose me. He stands by me. That truth seems to be something she simply can't accept, and it shows in the way she lashes out. Anyways, that day, after we refused to let her stay with us, she stormed off. My husband and I figured she had probably found somewhere else to stay, maybe with a friend or someone in the family. However, when we saw my father-in-law walk into our gathering holding hands with my mother-in-law, My husband and I were completely thrown off. We hadn't expected them to show up together, especially not after everything that had happened between them. Seeing them like that made us wonder if they had somehow worked things out and decided to give their relationship another chance. My father-in-law came over with a warm smile and gave both my husband and me a hug. He seemed genuinely calm and at peace. My mother-in-law, on the other hand, stuck to her usual behavior, completely ignoring me as if I weren't even there. By now, I've learned not to take it personally. It's just how she is with me. My father-in-law didn't make a big deal of the situation, but casually explained that he had made the decision to forgive her and that they were now back together. My husband and I were happy for them and didn't push for more details or ask any questions. It didn't feel like the time or place, and honestly, we were just trying to keep the day focused on our own big news and the joy of sharing it with everyone. Later in the evening, once everyone had settled down and we were all gathered around the dinner table, the atmosphere was warm and full of quiet chatter. Plates were full, glasses were clinking softly, and there was a comforting sense of closeness in the air. It felt like the perfect moment to make our announcement. That's when my husband stood up and gently raised his glass. The room quieted as everyone turned their attention to him. He began to speak, his voice steady but filled with emotion. He thanked everyone for being there and shared how grateful he was to be surrounded by family, especially during such a special time in our lives. Then, with a small smile, he said how excited the two of us were to welcome a new addition to our home. There was a brief pause. I could see a few confused expressions around the table as people tried to process what he had just said. And that's when I reached into my bag, pulled out the ultrasound photo and held it up for everyone to see. For a second, the room went completely silent. Everyone just stared at us, stunned. And then almost all at once, the entire table erupted. My parents were the first to leap out of their seats. My mom wrapped me in a tight hug, while my dad beamed with pride as he congratulated both of us. Then my sister came over, already in tears. She hugged me so tightly, her voice trembling, as she told me how happy she was for us. It meant so much to see everyone's joy. My father-in-law's face was lit up like we had just told him the best news of his life. He clapped my husband on the back and looked like he couldn't have been prouder. Other relatives were just as thrilled, offering congratulations, hugs, and kind words. But there was one person who didn't share in the joy. My mother-in-law sat silently, arms crossed, her expression tight with something between disbelief and irritation. While everyone else was standing or leaning in towards us, she stayed seated, stiff and clearly unhappy. Her eyes darted between me and my husband, and her face looked tense. Then, just as the congratulations were still echoing around the table, she raised her voice and said sharply, "Are you serious about this? Or is this a prank?" My husband, keeping his composure, gave her a calm smile. You could tell he was trying not to let her reaction spoil the moment for everyone else. In a steady voice, he responded, "No, Mom, this isn't a joke. We would never play a prank like this. We're really having a baby." But instead of softening, she just sat there and slowly shook her head, her expression turning even colder. Then she said something that felt like a slap across the face. "Well, I'm just disappointed." Around the table, you could see the shock on everyone's faces. Some looked confused. Others visibly uncomfortable. My sister's smile faded and my mom shot a look of concern across the table. Even my father-in-law looked caught off guard, glancing between his wife and us with an uneasy expression. Mother-in-law looked directly at my husband and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, I just wish you had married someone better, someone more suitable to carry on our family's superior genes. But you married her, and now look at what you've done." The room went dead silent again. I sat there completely stunned, unsure if I had even heard her right. Superior genes? I blinked, trying to process what she had just said. Who did she think she was? Superman? Did she honestly believe her genes were somehow above mine? Like this was some royal bloodline she needed to protect? My sister looked furious too. My mom's jaw had dropped slightly in disbelief. Even my father-in-law looked like he wanted to disappear into his chair. I don't know why, but I just started to laugh. Maybe it was my pregnancy brain playing tricks on me? Or maybe it was just how ridiculous the whole situation felt. Seeing my mother-in-law so upset that I'm pregnant somehow made everything feel almost funny. Like the irony was too much to hold in. My laughter caught her completely off guard. She looked furious, her face twisted with anger as she realized I was taking her insults seriously. I could see that she wasn't used to me reacting like this at all. My husband quickly stepped in, his voice firm but calm. He looked right at his mother and said, "Mom, you're being rude and disrespectful. You have no right to speak to her that way." I looked over at my husband and smiled softly, feeling grateful for his support. Then I added quietly but clearly, "More than rude, she's just being uneducated." My mother-in-law's eyes went wide and she gasped, "Excuse me?" Like she couldn't believe I had just said that to her. It was as if she thought no one would dare speak to her like that, especially not me. The tension in the room was thick, but for the first time I felt like I was standing my ground. I smiled at her, trying to keep my tone calm but firm. "You really need to calm down," I said gently, "and understand that your genes aren't some kind of superior thing. It's time to come back down to earth and stop being so delusional." She stared at me, speechless for a moment, but I wasn't done yet. I wanted to make sure she knew she couldn't keep putting me down like that. "So, since you're so interested in talking about superior genes," I continued, "I actually have something to tell you about that." I paused, watching her carefully, sensing that I had her full attention now. What she didn't know was that I had my maternity lab reports with me, the full medical disclosure about our baby. Those reports showed every possible deficiency or condition our little one might face. And the shocking part, all of those issues came from my husband's side of the family. Without saying another word, I calmly pulled out my phone and opened my maternity lab reports. I could feel everyone watching, sensing that something important was about to happen. I scrolled for a second and then looked straight at my mother-in-law. "If you really want to talk about genes," I said, "let's do it properly." I started reading the report out loud, listing each of the minor deficiencies that had been flagged. Nothing serious, nothing that would affect our baby in a harmful way, but enough to prove a point. After each one, I paused, glanced up at her, and let the silence hang in the air for just a second longer than necessary. The dramatic effect was intentional. "As you can see," I continued, keeping my voice even, "these aren't from my side. They all trace back to your family, your so-called superior genes." Her face turned red, the anger bubbling just beneath the surface. You could see it in her clenched jaw and the way her eyes narrowed. Struggling to find a response, she snapped, "Well, how do you know it's not from your side too? You can't just blame us." But before I could respond, my husband jumped in. "Because we tested for that, Mom," he said firmly. "She doesn't have any of these markers. I do. So let's not pretend this is anyone else's doing." It was one of those moments where the truth hit so hard, no one could argue with it. My mother-in-law looked like she was about to explode. But with all the facts out in the open and her own son standing firmly beside me, she had nowhere left to go. She just sat there, red-faced and stunned. The embarrassment was written all over her. She looked like she was still trying to piece together a way to spin the situation in her favor. But the damage was already done. I just shook my head, unable to hide my disbelief at her ignorance. I looked her straight in the eye and said, "Honestly, you're the last person who should be talking about comparing genes. If anything, my parents' genes seem to be doing just fine, clearly better than yours." That comment seemed to hit her pride hard. For a moment, she didn't say anything, but before she could come up with a response, my parents, who had been respectfully silent up to that point, finally spoke up. My mom looked at her, calm but firm, and said, "I think you owe our daughter an apology. That was uncalled for. You don't speak to people like that, especially not family." My dad nodded in agreement. "You came into their celebration and made it about your bitterness, and that's not okay. You crossed a line." Instead of accepting it with grace, my mother-in-law immediately became defensive. "Me apologize?" she scoffed. "She's the one who publicly humiliated me by reading out the report. She owes me an apology." I almost laughed again. Her idea of being humiliated was just being told the truth in front of people who wouldn't pretend with her anymore. But at that point, it wasn't even about winning an argument. It was about standing my ground and showing her that her old ways of manipulation weren't going to work here. My husband shouted at her for always trying to ruin our celebrations. His voice, usually calm and even, rose with frustration as he stood up and said loudly, "You do this every time, every celebration, every milestone. You ruin it." He continued, his voice shaking with emotion. "If this is how you're going to be, if you keep choosing to bring drama and bitterness into our lives, then we're not going to have a choice. We will cut you off. I'm not going to let you do this anymore. Not to me, and definitely not around my child." I nodded fully behind him. "We're about to become parents," I added, turning to her. "And the last thing I want is for our baby to be anywhere near this kind of negativity. We're trying to build something healthy and loving, and you clearly have no intention of being part of that." That's when she lost it. My mother-in-law stood up, shouting at both of us, accusing us of turning her son against her, of disrespecting her, of humiliating her in front of everyone. It was a full meltdown, loud, emotional, and honestly embarrassing to witness. My husband didn't flinch. He looked her in the eye and said clearly, "You need to leave now." There was a stunned silence. No one defended her. No one tried to stop her. In fact, one by one, family members began voicing their support for us openly. A few called out my mother-in-law's behavior for what it was: inappropriate, bitter, completely out of line. It was clear to everyone that we hadn't done anything wrong. We were just sharing one of the happiest moments of our lives, and somehow she had chosen that exact moment to tear it down. Still, she kept pushing. She kept digging herself deeper, continuing to throw jabs and trying to make herself the victim, even as the entire room turned against her. We just couldn't understand it. What was she trying to prove? Why was she so determined to ruin this for us? Eventually, my father-in-law came over before leaving and quietly apologized to me. He looked tired, embarrassed even. "I'm sorry for all that," he said, clearly referring to her behavior. "You didn't deserve it." I appreciated that. At least someone on that side had the decency to acknowledge the damage. But my mother-in-law had no remorse on her face. She just walked out without a word. No apology, no attempt to make things right, just silence and bitterness, like she had been the one wronged. And honestly, by that point, none of us were surprised. After they left, there was this collective sigh of relief. It was as if the air had finally cleared. Everyone relaxed again, and the celebration slowly returned to what it was meant to be, a joyful, intimate gathering filled with love and excitement. People were incredibly kind to me for the rest of the evening. They made sure I felt supported, respected, and appreciated. I received hugs, warm smiles, and genuine congratulations from every corner of the room. It reminded me that no matter how loud one bitter voice might be, the love and support of the people who truly care for you will always be louder. Anyway, ever since the party, my mother-in-law has stuck to her narrative. She's continued to insist that I was the one who humiliated her, as if she played no part in what happened. A few days after the gathering, she even texted me saying I had crossed a line by calling out her family's genes in front of everyone. According to her, I had made private information public and embarrassed her intentionally. She completely ignored the fact that she was the one who started the conversation about superior genes in the first place. She was the one who made a public spectacle out of her own insult, and I simply responded with facts. Facts she didn't like, but facts nonetheless. Now she wants me to apologize, but I've refused. I won't apologize for standing up for myself, especially not when I was being attacked at my own celebration, no less. I've stayed respectful but firm. If anything, she should be the one apologizing for her words, her attitude, and for trying to ruin a moment that should have been filled with nothing but love and joy. So, Reddit, AITA. Update 1. Hi everyone. I wanted to say thank you for the overwhelming support and kind words. I honestly wasn't expecting so many people to relate or be as outraged as we were that night. I've been getting a lot of messages and comments, so I figured I'd do a proper update and also answer some of the most common questions people keep asking me about the situation with my mother-in-law and the pregnancy announcement. Why did you bring up the lab results at all? Wasn't that kind of extreme? Answer. Normally, I wouldn't. But when someone stands up in the middle of my pregnancy announcement and says they're disappointed and wishes their son married someone with better genes than mine, yeah, I think that deserves a reality check. I only brought up the lab reports to shut her down and show how hypocritical her statement was. I didn't insult her, I just stated facts. Question. Were the deficiencies you mentioned serious? Will they affect your baby? Answer. No, thankfully nothing major or life-threatening. Just small genetic markers and vitamin deficiencies that we're managing and monitoring. But they're still relevant because mother-in-law was going on about how superior her family's genetics were, and everything flagged in the report came from her side. So, pot, meet, kettle. Question. What did your husband say after the party? Did he still support you? Answer. Absolutely. He was just as upset as I was, maybe more. He felt like his mom embarrassed herself and hurt me in front of people who cared about us. He stood up for me in the moment, and he's continued to do so. He's also gone low contact with her since then. Question. What's the situation with your father-in-law? He seems supportive. Answer. My father-in-law actually apologized to me before he left the party. I think he was embarrassed too, and I could tell he didn't agree with mother-in-law's behavior. He hasn't said much since, but he hasn't defended her either. I think he's just trying to stay out of the crossfire. Question. Why is your mother-in-law so obsessed with you not being suitable? Answer. Honestly, I think it boils down to control. She's never liked me because she couldn't manipulate me or guilt trip me the way she does with others. She tried to ruin our wedding, tried to get between us in the early stages of our relationship, and ever since she realized my husband chooses me over her every time, it's like she's made me her personal villain. Question. Has she apologized since? Answer. No, in fact, she's doubled down. She texted me saying I was out of line for making private health into public and demanded I apologize. I told her that if she didn't want facts shared, she probably shouldn't have insulted me in front of a room full of people first. She hasn't responded since. Question. How are you doing now? Answer. I'm okay. We've chosen to focus on the pregnancy, our home, and the people who actually support us. After she left, the vibe of the party completely shifted back to warmth and love, and everyone was genuinely kind to me. That's what I'm holding on to, not her bitterness. Anyways, thanks again to everyone who's followed along. You've helped me stay sane through this. Update 2. It's been almost 2 weeks since the party, and honestly, we've been doing our best to move forward. We've been focused on the pregnancy, the nursery, trying to enjoy this stage of life without any more drama. Earlier today, my father-in-law came over to our house unexpectedly. He looked exhausted, like a man carrying too much burden. He sat down with us, took a breath, and said something that didn't shock us, but still made us tired just hearing it. Apparently, mother-in-law had been relentlessly pushing him day and night to talk to us on her behalf and convince us to apologize. Yes, us. She still believes she was the victim and that somehow we owe her an apology for humiliating her at the party. She refuses to see what she did wrong, and instead of taking accountability, she's turned this into a personal crusade. Father-in-law said this has caused huge fights between the two of them over the last couple of weeks. And in those fights, a lot of things have come to light. Things he admits he's been sweeping under the rug for years. He told us that all the conflict around our pregnancy announcement has forced him to face some hard truths about their marriage. Truths he'd been too emotionally entangled to confront before. My husband eventually asked him what we were all thinking. Dad, why did you even get back with her after she cheated on you? Father-in-law went quiet for a moment. Then he admitted with a kind of heartbreaking honesty, because I've always loved your mother. After she cheated, I was angry, but I didn't know how to walk away after so many years. But now, after seeing how she treats you two, and how she tries to twist everything and poison even the happiest moments, I am finally beginning to see her for who she really is. He apologized again, not just for the party, but for letting this go on so long. He admitted that he wished he had spoken up sooner. We told him we appreciated his honesty. We don't hold his silence against him. When you're emotionally tied to someone toxic like that for decades, it's hard to untangle what's love and what's manipulation. We don't know what's going to happen between mother-in-law and father-in-law now. Whether they break up or stay is up to them. But for us, our boundary is firm. Mother-in-law will not be involved in our pregnancy unless she changes her behavior and takes accountability, which, if history has taught us anything, is highly unlikely. Update 3. Things have taken a serious turn since my last update. My father-in-law has officially ended things with my mother-in-law again. This time, he seems really serious. He's filed for divorce. After everything that's happened, it feels like he's finally learned his lesson and wants nothing to do with mother-in-law. But of course, mother-in-law hasn't taken the news quietly. She showed up at our house, absolutely furious. She was screaming at both me and my husband, blaming us for polluting father-in-law's mind with nonsense. According to her, it's our fault that her marriage has fallen apart, that we somehow manipulated father-in-law into leaving her. My husband didn't hold back. He made it perfectly clear to her that we had absolutely nothing to do with his father's decision. He told her straight up that father-in-law is an adult, not a child, and that no matter what, we did not influence him or change his mind. Father-in-law's decision was his own, based on years of what he's seen and experienced. She immediately started ranting, saying that none of this would have happened if we hadn't argued with her and embarrassed her at the pregnancy announcement. According to her, that moment is what supposedly destroyed her marriage. She acted like our response to her cruelty was what caused the split, not the years of manipulation, the cheating, or the screaming matches between them. But then she crossed a line I never expected. She started cursing our unborn baby for bringing bad luck into the family. That was it. My husband, who had been keeping his calm until then, suddenly changed. His whole demeanor shifted. He stepped forward, pointed straight at her, and said in a low, serious tone, "You need to leave, now. You're not welcome here, and if you don't walk off this property in the next minute, I will call the police." Mother-in-law was stunned. I had never seen my husband this angry before. For the first time in a long time, she also realized he wasn't bluffing. She huffed, cursed under her breath, but eventually she turned around and left. After she left, we locked the door and sat in silence for a few minutes afterwards, just trying to process what had just happened. It's one thing to dislike me, but to curse your own grandchild? That's beyond anything I expected, even from her. Ever since then, my husband and I have discussed getting a formal restraining order if she shows up again. This is no longer just about petty drama or hurt feelings. This is about protecting our peace, our child, and our future family. If mother-in-law thought her behavior would guilt us into fixing things with her, then she was wrong. She's burned that bridge completely now. Later, we also called father-in-law and discussed everything with him that happened. He was beyond disgusted. He couldn't believe mother-in-law would go that far, showing up uninvited, blaming us for her failed marriage, and then stooping so low as to curse her own grandchild. He said it was inhuman, and for the first time I think we saw the full weight of regret in his voice. Regret for going back to her. Regret for all the years he spent making excuses for her behavior. He apologized again for her actions, for the stress she's brought into our lives, and for how long he remained silent about the things he knew weren't okay. But more than that, he has encouraged us to take legal action. Hearing that from him has really solidified for us that this isn't just family drama anymore. This is someone who is becoming a threat to our mental peace, to our emotional safety, and potentially to the well-being of our future child. Stay tuned for more stories from our girl relationships.